Welcome to Financial Confidence for High-Achieving Women, the go-to podcast for women of color entrepreneurs overwhelmed by their finances and ready to transform their money mindset, take control of their money, and build sustainable wealth. I'm your host, Taryn, better known as T-Money, certified financial coach and CEO of Money Honey LLC. I believe that abundance is your birthright and that good money management doesn't mean cutting out the joy from your life. Stick around to learn how you can build intentional money habits that align with your biggest lifestyle goals. Let's get into today's episode. How do I create a reliable budget with unpredictable income? Welcome to episode 19 of the Financial Confidence for High-Achieving Women podcast. I'm your host, Taryn, better known as T-Money. And today we're moving on to part 2 of our 4-part series. In this episode, we're talking all about budgeting with irregular income. If you're an entrepreneur, creative, and or freelancer, I think you'll really enjoy this one. You'll learn how to understand your income patterns, my favorite budgeting method for irregular income, and how to plan for the lean times. Before we get into today's episode, if you're ready to take control of your finances like the rich bitch you are, I invite you to book a 90-minute Organize Your Money Honey intensive with me. You'll walk away with a clear, crystal clear financial plan, a budget you'll actually stick to, and actionable steps to start saving and investing faster. Head to the link in the show notes to book your spot. Welcome. I want to say to the new listeners, I've had a few events over the past couple of weeks, has definitely brought some new people to the podcast. So welcome. I'm happy to have you here. And quick personal share, I just wrapped up another Rich Bish brunch this past weekend, and that was great. And just being able to get together to have impactful and insightful money conversations. We talked about money mindset shifts. We did a visualization exercise to really connect with our goals. We identified action steps for those goals and just how money is going to support us in that way. Loved my time there with the women that were at the event. And here we go. Now we're going to get into irregular income budgeting. This is something that when clients connect with me and they feel like every budget has not worked for them, and especially if they don't make money on a regular schedule, kind of like we talked about in the Payday Money episode before this, they get so excited about this, and rightfully so, because it's something that I used as well as I was starting to really get into my financial journey. And I would say I definitely still incorporate parts of it now because yes, as an entrepreneur, sometimes a paycheck is not the same every single time you pay yourself. And so this is definitely still a lot of what I use currently. And it's been helpful because this method is going to help you to be able to survive some of the more slow season type moments. And so this is such a good thing to learn, and just know that even if you do have more variable income, whether it's commission based, whatever, you can still have a budget that works for you. You can still manage your money, and be amazing. And this is, great too it's just great, honestly. And so I did want to share too that people with irregular incomes are 3 times more likely to experience financial stress. And so by implementing the things I share today, you will not. Right? We can get out of that. You don't have to be one of those people that experiences these things. And so this first thing that I want to cover is just understanding your income pattern. There's different types of irregular income, right? So if you're a freelancer, if you do more commission-based, that tends to happen a lot in sales. If you have a seasonal business, so maybe you are a holiday business and, the rest of the year, there's not as much going on, right? So depending on what you are doing, you'll know for sure if you have more of the variable income. You can track this and analyze your income fluctuations by starting to dive into some of your financial reports. Now, if this is a business, right, we can look at things like like your balance sheet, if you have like a cash flow statement, and we can look at those things like month to month, right? We can look at your profit and loss quarter to quarter, even to kind of get an idea of the fluctuations that's happening, like where your spending categories are a little bit higher, what parts of the year you tend to receive more income or revenue than others. And so really with this, like it can be interchangeable between the things that you apply for your personal finances as well as the things that you apply for your business finances. And when it comes to your income fluctuations also, I personally, I love a good app. Okay. Being able to see like what is happening with how much income I'm receiving in particular months or, how much I'm spending in particular areas. Like it's a great thing. And so you want to start to identify your personal seasons of abundance. And I'll say, for lack of a better term coming to my mind right now, we'll say scarcity, right? So we want to identify what those seasons are. And the cool thing about this method that I'm going to teach you is that no matter what the season is, it can still work for you. And so what I want you, we're going to do, I'll add an exercise here at the end for your action steps, but I want you to income map for the past 12 months to start to identify some of your patterns. So identify if there's like a particular month per year that you tend to bring in more money than others. We want to note that. That way we can set up the system that we need so that way you're not just kind of fully inside of the fluctuations, like the ups and downs of your finances. So that is something, and I'll bring that back again, like I said, at the end of the episode for the action step. The next part here is the method. Okay. So my favorite thing to do with irregular income is percentage budgeting. Okay. So you'll get your percentages based off of the categories that you see in your income map. Okay. And then this can also work with the expenses too. Now, there's the traditional method that you probably heard of in terms of like the 50-30-20 rule, right? And that's technically a percentage budgeting method. That one I would say it tends to be a bit more on the basic side, right? But it can work if you're just getting into it. And so what that looks like is 50% goes to your needs. And I always think about that as like need to survive. And then 30% goes to your wants. So the things that you just want, you don't need them to survive, but you just want them. And then almost like your fun money, right? And then the 20% goes to your savings and or debt payoff. So that is the 50-30-20 rule. That's the cut and dry of it, right? The way that I like to do it is based off of what your actual bills are and then using your average amount of income. So we don't want to go with your lowest here. We don't want to go with your highest, but it's almost like taking whatever your baseline is. So no matter what is it that you bring home every month, right? And we can use that to determine what your percentages are. So say that no matter what you bring in, for the sake of example, $5,000 per month. Okay. And then let's say we discover that your bills are $3,000 per month. So we would calculate that out to be about 60% of your income is your bills. So that means the bills is 60%. From there, you have another 40% to play with. And so what that can look like is choosing those other categories dependent upon what your goals are. Now, I always love to have a savings one in there. So let's say that's 10%. So now we have 30% left. And so for this, maybe we want to have, 20% of it be that fun money. So 20% is that. And then the other 10%, or that last 10% that we have here, could be towards, investment goal, or like your retirement. So that's how we would split it up. So you see how it's like a little bit more specific and in depth than your 50-30-20 rule, because in this case, we went 60-20-10-10. We did 60% for your bills, 20% for fun, 10% for savings, 10% for retirement. Okay, so that is just like a quick way to set up your percentages. And you might want to change them depending on, what is going on in your life. So that means, so let's also look at it this way, right? So with that, say you have a really good month and you bring in 9,000 that month. You can still follow the same structure. And so, yes, you have a surplus because you're making more money. However, when you put aside that same amount in terms of percentages, what you're essentially doing is creating a buffer for when things are a bit on the lean side. Okay. And so nearly 80% of freelancers report experiencing cash flow issues. And I attribute that a lot to when you receive a lot of money, you're just kind of like standing in, I have a lot of money, so I can spend it however, versus being intentional about, okay, let me make sure I'm covered and my savings is where I need it to be. There's a buffer in my account. So that way, when things are slower, if things are slower, I'm not worried about my living expenses. So that is the benefit of doing this. So, some other areas you can have percentages for, if you like essential expenses versus just bills overall. Some people split into that category. There's business reinvestment, there's discretionary spending, as we talked about, the emergency fund, all those things. And this is different from the traditional budgeting advice, because a lot of the traditional stuff focuses on this is how much you're making each check, and therefore you should just divide it that way. But if it's different for you each time, then it's helpful to have a method that's just as flexible as you are. And now when it comes to that lean time, I already talked about how you want to, really save a bit extra in the abundant seasons. So that way you can be okay during these times. And then this is where I would say, like, especially for you, emergency funds are going to be very important. So you want to make sure you're pouring into that, so that way you are covered just in case. You may use it, you may not, right? But you know that it's there. And even sometimes just knowing it is there, like that emergency fund is there, can be so freeing and bring you that peace of mind when it comes to managing your money in this way. And there's also ways that you might want to think, how can I supplement income during those slow periods? So during those times, what are some additional things that you could do? Is there additional service that you could add? Is there are there different speaking engagements you could do, for example? So we want to get into some things that you can do during those lean times as well to support yourself and still bring a little bit more cash flow in. Like when it comes to financial, in uncertainty, you win and lose based off of your mindset. If you can focus on what is coming in, if you can focus on the good, if you can focus on that stuff, it makes those times of uncertainty feel a little less panic stricken. So if you succumb to the panic of oh my gosh, my income is so much less, then you start making decisions from that place of desperation, which is not healthy. That's not a great place to be making decisions from, because then that's an easy way to start sacrificing, some of those values that you have, some of the goals that you have. You could end up putting yourself into a place financially that's harder to get out of, simply for the fact that you were like, oh my gosh, things feel lean and I need to do whatever is possible, right? I think there's a lot that can be said about us learning to be in a slow season and to be able to hold that. Because even in my own journey, like, a lot of how I started multiple businesses was like, and I used to brag about this. Ugh, we love growth. But I used to brag about how, like, I never had a slow season because I always had a business that was in its busy season when another one was in its slow season. And while that felt productive for me at the time, it was really something that was taking me away from what I feel like is the true meaning of sustainable growth when it comes to your company, because every company has a slow season. And when you can truly learn how to embrace the slow season, it makes the busy, the abundant ones even better, because you can put different systems and improvements in place because you're working on them during that slow season. And so you can put them into practice during the busier season. And if you're always thinking about or focused on what, like, the busy season, you don't have that time to intentionally upgrade a client experience. So that is there's part of it that maybe that's another episode where we talk about really leaning into the slow season. So in general, let's get into how we can start to implement, right? So you want to set up separate accounts for the different purposes. So going back to uh, that example that we had earlier with the 60-20-10-10 split, right? So you could have the bills account. We've talked about a fund money account, and then the 10% for that savings, that's one savings account. And then the 10%, that's the investment account. So like I've talked about in other episodes, you can have it automatically split for you with a paycheck, or you can set up those transfers yourself. And I still, Rocket Money is still not sponsoring this episode. If they ever do want to, though, like, I really do enjoy them. But that's like one of my favorite apps to, um, to utilize to when you have irregular income. And so that still shows you where some of the ebbs and flows are. It does a lot of the calculations for you, so you don't have to do that. And then as your income grows, as your expenses change, your budget gets to change. The percentages get to change. And it doesn't have to be, this is like budgeting in general, y'all. Like, it doesn't have to be something that is rigid. It can really be living and breathing. It can really be something that has adjustments and upgrades and things like that. So a great time to do a review of your budget in general is like once a quarter, and if not monthly. So that way you can make the adjustments that you need to make. And so with that, the different points here in terms of the irregular income is that you want to understand your income patterns, because that's going to allow you to create the categories, know when those seasons are, so you can prepare for them. You can utilize the percentage budgeting method, which is, like I said, one of my favorites, and set that up so that it is working for you. You can do some automations around that. And then you want to plan for those times that your income is a little bit lower, so that way you are still covered and your needs are still covered despite what is going on in that season. And, separate those accounts. And so the action step one is, I want you to do that income mapping exercise for the past 12 months to identify your patterns when it comes to your income. So we want to see, what are there a couple months year after year that you always tend to receive your highest amount, right? And we want to note those so that way you can, start to prepare. And then also look at the months where your income is a little bit lower and see how that stacks up against those months where it's higher, so that way you can make those preparations. So that's your action steps for this week. And again, if you want some support in creating these percentages for you, in figuring out some of these allocations and in getting the income map done, then schedule that Organize Your Money Honey intensive with me, and we will make it happen. And so the next episode in this 4-part series is all about why you need to add your goals to your budget. And so I can't wait to dive into that with you next time. And so with that, have a good one. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Financial Confidence for High Achieving Women podcast. I hope the insights shared in this episode have inspired you to take one small action step toward a more empowered relationship with money. If you're ready to take control of your finances like the rich bitch you are, I invite you to book a 90-minute Organize Your Money Honey intensive with me. You'll walk away with a crystal clear financial plan, a budget you'll actually stick to, and actionable steps to start saving and investing faster. Head to the link in the show notes to book your spot. I'm so grateful to be part of your financial journey, and I can't wait to see all the incredible moves you'll make. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.